Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be, am I being too negative? Well, today I'm going to discuss an email. This is actually an email coaching session that a client that I did about 2 weeks ago. I did a phone coaching session with him. And the interesting thing with this guy is he lives over in Europe, and so does his girlfriend, but they're living a little bit of a distance apart from one another, and they usually spend the weekends together. But it was interesting talking to him because he's a pretty successful guy, and so is his girlfriend. But he just has this, he really thought things were like in real dire straits with his relationship. And as I talked to him and listened to what was going on and listened to what his girlfriend was doing and saying, things weren't really that bad. However, the way he's acting, and I pointed this out to him during the phone session, is that he has a lot of presuppositions presupposing that in essence things are not going to work out, things aren't going well in the relationship, or they're not going to go well in the future, and it's really clouding his judgment and his ability to do the appropriate thing. So before we get into it, I've got a quote that I wrote that I'd like to share with you, and it says, "Are you a glass half full or half empty kind of person? People who see the glass as half full tend to have a more optimistic and positive outlook on life and their ability to make their dreams a reality. When we are fearful of an undesired outcome or circumstance, we often take actions that actually make what we fear happen. Act and think as if things always will work out for you. Make your decisions and take your actions based upon the assumption that you were designed to succeed, be happy, and have things work out the way you want. Stay focused, stay positive, and keep taking action towards what you want, and you will be a winner. Remember, losers see the glass as half empty and whine about their problems, but most often do nothing to help themselves." That's something to think about. So let's go ahead and jump into this guy's email. He says, "Hey Coach, recently we had a phone session over Skype. As I told you during the session, I went to Europe for 5 days to visit my girl in her home country. I did what you suggested, and I planned the trip out with a few detours since she has friends that she rarely sees because she lives abroad. So what I told him to do is install Google Maps on his phone if he didn't already have it, and before he goes over there, plan the evenings out, plan the dates out, have everything in mind, what he's going to do and where he's going to go, be the leader in the interaction." Because when we were talking the phone session, there were times where he would just kind of let his girlfriend take the lead in the relationship, and he was giving his power away in essence when he was doing that. So I'm glad to see that he listened to me and took care of those things and took care of the scheduling, and that allows the woman to totally be in her feminine energy to receive him, receive his strength, and all she really has to do is show up, look hot, have a good time, and let him lead the interaction, ultimately to a successful conclusion sometime in the evening in the bedroom. He says, "Among them was a male friend of hers, which I know from last year when they both worked for the same company. She tells me everything she did with him in detail, and he was in a relationship himself, so I didn't worry back then, but I couldn't help myself to ask her if something was going on last year because they had such a great vibe together." That's not making you look strong. And at the end of the day, this is coming from your fear that she's going to find somebody better or ditch you for another guy. And when you ask something like this, you're in essence saying, "Hey, are you cheating on me with this other guy? Because I don't think I'm good enough, and it's just a matter of time before you ditch me like all the rest." And that's the kind of thing that gives a woman pause. I mean, think about it. When you say something to a woman that you're with, whether it's your girlfriend or your wife or someone that you just started dating, you got to ask yourself one simple question. Do I feel lucky? No, is this going to make me look confident in her eyes? Or is this going to make me look weak and insecure and unsure of myself? And if you make yourself or say something that makes yourself look weak and unsure, she's going to back up, pull away, because now instead of sensing your strength, she's sensing your weakness. And if you're in a fearful state and she starts to back off a little bit, typically the insecure, needy guy starts to pursue, starts to chase, starts to do more things that communicate that he doesn't feel worthy. And those are the kind of things that cause her to think, it makes her feel wishy-washy towards you. She goes from being really turned on by you to, I don't know about this guy. He says, as I mentioned, I play poker a lot, and bluffs are essentially lies, and I'm very good at picking up clues through body language, voice tone. But she did pass my test, and I told her that. Again, that's something you got to keep to yourself. Remember, it's a scientific fact that women are more attracted to men whose feelings are unclear, and the way you're acting is you're acting if you're unsure of yourself. You're in essence acting like a woman. You should have the attitude of course she wants me. Of course she's glad to see me. Of course she's having a great time with me. Of course she's going to have great sex with me. That's the place you should come from. That is confidence. That's being sure of yourself. But you're not acting like a guy who is sure of himself. You're acting like a guy who's suspicious, who doubts his own attractiveness and his own self-worth. And the more you act that way, the more you're going to give your girlfriend reasons to start to doubt you and back away, move into her masculine. And you're already in your feminine when you're acting this way, and that destroys the sexual polarity. It's a turnoff. He says, she tells me when other guys are hitting on her, but she also told me that she cheated on some of her ex-boyfriends because she was unhappy and looking for someone better. So what that tells me about her is that when she gets to a place in her relationship where she realizes that basically your balls haven't dropped yet and you're not acting like a man, she is totally comfortable with lining up your replacement behind your back. But the good sign is that she tells you about other guys hitting on her. Now, where it would be a red flag is if she goes from telling you about these things to never mentioning them, because obviously it's not like your girlfriend's going to lose her hotness or her attractiveness overnight. And so if every week on a weekly basis she's telling you about dudes that hit on her, and then all of a sudden she doesn't mention any of that for several weeks, then you got a reason to be concerned. Then you got to look at your game and how you're showing up and how you're acting. But like I said, at least you understand how she is. If she's unhappy, she'll line up a replacement before she ditches you. Why? Because that's exactly what she did to her previous boyfriends. He says, when I addressed this, she said she only cheated on her last boyfriend and they were not really together and was an open relationship, and that we are in a serious relationship and she wouldn't do it because I don't deserve it. Unless you keep acting this way. He says, was it weak for me to ask in the first place? Absolutely. Think about it. Are you acting like a guy who is thinking from the end, is thinking like James Bond would? Of course we're going to be fucking later. Of course you love me. Of course you're going to fall in love with me. Of course you're excited to see me. No, you're acting like a guy who is totally full of doubts and unsure of himself. And if you do that in poker, and I know I asked him a similar question when we were talking. I said, what happens if you do that shit in poker? He says, I'll lose my ass. I'll get my ass kicked. There you go. And women want your strength. They deserve your strength. They deserve your best. And are you giving her your best right now? I'd say obviously not. He says, is she trustworthy? As long as you're showing up and acting like a man, absolutely. But you got to listen for the clues. Like I said a few moments ago, you got to listen and see, is she still talking about and telling me about guys that are hitting on her? Because once she stops doing that, then you got to really look closely at what you've been doing and saying and how you've been showing up in the relationship. He says, then we stumbled over some major cultural difference. She said that in her country, the man in the relationship always pays for restaurant visits, activities, and travel expenses in the relationship, which is totally different than from the country that I'm from. Here we share the cost in relationships more or less, with the woman being slightly in favor. Well, the way I look at those things, if you're asking around on a date, it's your show, dude. You should be paying for those things. You shouldn't take a girl out and then expect her to pay half the bill or part of it. That's bullshit. And on the flip side, if she invites you to dinner or invites you over to her place to make you dinner, bring a bottle of wine or something like that, contribute. I mean, at the end of the day, the whole purpose of all relationships is you go there to give. You're there to meet each other's needs. But if you're invited, it's like if you have a party, you know, hey, I'm having a keg pool party at my house. I'm going to have pizza and beer and everything. You don't have all 50 of your friends show up and they go, oh, I need $5 from everybody. I mean, that was understandable in high school because everybody's broke, but if you're inviting people over for your party because you want to entertain and show your friends and family a good time, then you should foot the bill. That's like my dad. You know, when we go out in his yacht with friends and family, The rule is the captain doesn't pay for his lunch or his drinks because, I mean, hell, to fill up the gas tank in that damn gas guzzler, it's a couple $100. He says, I told her that in my country, men are usually not like this, and I advised all of my friends to not do it, and then I would break up with a girl when I get the feeling of being used. That just tells me you're kind of presupposing that you're getting used. He says, in the past, when we were living together in another country, we handled it in that way, and then I pay a little bit more rent, and I paid for most of our activities because I earned 4 to 6 times more than her, but the situation is different now because she's got a really good job and she earns almost as much as I do. Again, if you're inviting her out, you should pay. That's the way I look at it, and that's the way I handle things. He says, to her defense, this discussion, she always offered to pay herself. Well, that's a good sign. That means that she's a giver and she wants to contribute. He says, am I cheap? Well, at the end of the day, if you're inviting her out, you should be paying. You shouldn't invite a girl out and go, hey, give me $50 for the food or the drink. It's like, come on, man. He says, after 3 days, we went to her hometown for a day, and the last night there, we were at her place, and she resisted to sleep with me. She told me that the reason was that I smoked during the day because I forgot my electronic cigarette, and that she feels a little disgusted from the smell and how I taste it. That's another thing. If you're going to go out on a date, take a fucking shower. I mean, seriously, dude. If you take a giant fucking dump, take a shower and fucking clean your ass. You don't want your girl going down on you and smelling shit. And I'm being totally serious here. Think about it. Think about the other person. Be considerate here. If you smell like an ashtray, that's one thing. But if you had been clean and been taking care of yourself, partly you got to look at the fact that your behavior and a lot of things you're saying and doing, you're not making yourself look confident and sure of yourself. You look very unsure of yourself. But if you'd been confident and sure of yourself, she probably wouldn't have cared too much about the cigarette, or she would have just said, hey, I want to make love to you right now, but I'd really appreciate it if you go brush your teeth to get the ashtray smell out of your mouth. He says, I was pushy, but we ended up having amazing sex. So you broke down her barriers and you got what you wanted. You showed your strength in that moment, so that's obviously where you redeemed yourself because she let you have your way with her. He says, after that, she asked me why I've been so distant, and I told her that she did things in the last few weeks that turned me off, which are, number one, she asked me to pay part of her rent, although she gets it paid by her employer, with the reason being me visiting her every weekend and it being part of her salary, and she could save that money. Well, this was something that her parents said, oh, you should have him start paying for some of your rent now. Which I thought that was a little weird because obviously if she comes to visit him where he lives, he doesn't expect her to pay that rent. He says, I told her that I would feel totally used and I'm not doing it, which she accepted without wanting to hear my reasoning. So, that's good. You're standing up for what you believe in, and that's fine. And she went along with it. She totally submitted. It was like, okay. It obviously wasn't an issue. And by the way, if you hear all that noise, like sirens and stuff in the background, there's a big race going on downtown. And so obviously it's getting picked up in the mic if you're hearing it. He says, also I told her if she would have insisted that, I would have walked away from our relationship. Obviously because you're saying I would feel used under those circumstances. And that's good because you're stating your purpose, you're stating what you want, and you're stating terms that are basically a deal breaker. He says, it slipped out of me and only the weak act controlling with threads, right? I don't know what you mean by that. He says, and number two, I told her that I think she doesn't appreciate all that I do for a lot of things because she doesn't obviously speak the language, and I still pay a lot for most of our activities. Well, if you're the one inviting her, you should pay. That's just being chivalrous. That's called being a gentleman. And at the end of the day, it's your show. He says, she asked me how she can show her appreciation, which I didn't have an answer to. A nice Hummer in the morning would be a great way. Be playful. Have fun. Don't be so serious all the time. Make love to me. Initiate sex. I don't want to always be the one initiating sex because that shows me that you love me and you appreciate me as well and you want me and you desire me. I want to feel desired as well as a man. That's a good opportunity to mention those things to her. He says, I know I shouldn't be a pleaser and a manservant, but I really I can't really let my girl down. How do you see it? Just tell her the things that you like and you want. Obviously, if she asked, that means that she's open to doing those things. Again, the whole purpose of all relationships is you go there to give, and she's asking, what can I do to more meet your needs? That's a good sign. He says, number 3, I told her that we're having too little sex, and she promised that we're going to have more in the future. Again, that goes back to acting like a man. If you're acting like a stud and like a dude that expects to get what he wants, she'd be more turned on by you. She'd want to have more sex with you. But I also think it's a good thing that you told her, you should tell her if you haven't already, that you'd like her to initiate it more instead of you always being the one to initiate it. When the guy is doing most of the initiating, that's a sign of where her attraction level is. And again, a lot of things that you've been focusing on and saying, you're not making yourself look confident. You're making yourself look like a needy, insecure guy that expects to get dumped. I mean, think about it. Women want to receive you. They're physically designed to receive your strength. But when you're acting weak, think about it. Does that create attraction? Obviously not. He says, I think I shouldn't have complained about this and instead should have worked on my seduction game, right? Abso-fucking-lutely. Again, James Bond goes for what he wants. He says, she takes too long when we message each other to respond, and I told her that I deserve her full attention since I always finish my poker sessions to talk to her. She said she needs to talk to her parents too. And I told her again that we don't need to talk every day. And she told me that she tries to answer me faster and we can reduce our number of talks. Again, it's always better when you guys are apart, that if you're going to be talking on instant message or Skype, that she's the one that initiates it. And if she IMs you, I would move it to a Skype session, a video session where you can see each other instead of all this instant messaging bullshit. Because when you instant message somebody, it's too easy to get things misconstrued. It's better to talk in person, especially if you're doing video Skype where you can actually see each other and you can see her face, you can see her body language, you can see if what you said was appropriate or not and take a corrective action. But if you're just sending instant messages, you don't really know. Especially if you're doing things that make you look weak, of course she's going to take longer to get back to you. Because if she senses you're going to come unglued or you're a little needy, she's going to purposely not get back to you right away to see how you handle it. And if you don't handle it appropriately, again, you're giving her more reason to back away. He says the obvious solution to this is to speak more on the phone. Again, we just talked about that a second ago. And plus, in our phone session, I mentioned this to you. He says it's more efficient and I can get back on the tables earlier. He says, well, all in all, I enjoyed my trip to Europe. And the positive is that her parents don't have seemed to drop their racism since her mother told her that she feels sorry that she didn't meet me. Well, he's Oriental and she's European, and her parents are, I guess, a little bit racist. And they've made some racist comments about that. But they seem to be warming up because obviously she's saying positive things about you to her parents, obviously, which that's a good sign. He says, I'm a little angry because she told her that she should find someone better and I don't even have eyes. It's like nothing you can do about it. If you're ever around the parents and they say something inappropriate, you need to let them know, like, that's fucking bullshit and that's racist. And you're either going to apologize to me or I'm fucking leaving. I don't think they'd have the balls to say something like that to you in person, but you need to let your girlfriend know that that is bullshit. And if your parents actually want to meet me, they need to apologize for that bull crap. Because if that's the way they are, I don't have any fucking desire to meet them. He says, after a minute, I let go of that anger and told her that we can meet next time. After our phone session, I realized that I see things too negative, you think? And I do a lot of things right, but unfortunately also a lot of things wrong, but I see what the other guys do as well. He says, I still think I'm well ahead of the curve. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're doing pretty well. It's just like you're your own worst enemy, and the only real problems that you're having with her not being as interested in sex or being a little distant is just because that's in response to your behavior. He says, after all these issues, I'm asking myself if it's worth all the trouble. Come on, man. He says, am I seeing this too negative? Yeah. Maybe I should start reading your book that I bought. Duh. Yeah, that's absolutely a good thing for you to be doing, because you'll see a lot of these little behaviors and things that you're doing. You realize that it's inappropriate. And this is part of the problem. You don't know my book, you haven't read it, and therefore you have a knowledge gap. And since you have a knowledge gap, you're making unnecessary mistakes. So if you haven't downloaded a copy of my Kindle ebook yet, go to my website, and underneath the email sign-up box, there's a link that will take you right to the Amazon Kindle download page. Now, you don't have to have a Kindle e-reader to read my book. Just download one of their free e-reader apps for whatever electronic device that you want to read it on. And for those of you that want an audio version of it, the nice thing about Kindle is it will actually, in a nice, sexy female voice, read my book to you through the Kindle app. So he says, thanks in advance for your help. And so that's what I would do if I were you. You're doing pretty good overall. It's just a big thing is you need to bury yourself in my book, read it 10 to 15 times so you get to know it so well you don't have to think about it anymore. It's great that you're watching the videos and read my articles, but you're really just getting bits and pieces of the baseline information that I teach in my videos and my articles. So if you'd like to get my help personally, the quickest way to get my help is to book a paid phone coaching session. You can do that by going to my website, click the products tab at the top of your screen, and follow the instructions. And I will talk to you soon.